It isn't coming from control.
Yeah.
Honor our time.
It's interesting that it's
Yep.
fading in and out, which does what we.
Okay,
Okay, remember that.
are we recording and stuff? Are we doing it live too?
Yeah.
We are.
Wow, is it
Okay.
live?
Okay.
It's
All right.
streaming.
Wow.
Instead
Okay.
of, when's their next?
Are we good? Okay.
Yeah, okay, so we got a long
Good
time.
morning, everybody.
Okay,
Welcome
good,
to
months, I like
our
that.
special city council meeting today. There's Jared. We will get started right away today. We're gonna turn it over to Nathan, let you drive today.
Alright, so we'll start with a little bit up here and then there's going to be some exercises. We might use the whiteboard. Sit whichever side you want, but if you don't wanna crane your neck, it'd probably be easier with this. So what I'm hoping we're not doing today, I always look to Dilbert for wisdom. So the bottom one is what I'm really concerned about, that you take so long to come up with a plan that it's obsolete by the time you're done, and then you have to start again. I mean, it's not a knock, but I think sometimes our general plan processes are that way. We spend so long to get to that point that we're the guy down here. And of course a Yogi Bear, if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up someplace else. So that's where we want to hopefully do today. So goals for today, really my hope out of this is that we identify several top level strategies. Think outcomes, whatever, how we want to, what do we want? Why do we want that? And then after we're done with that, we can start to formulate goals that fit into that, and hopefully if we have time, we can start building the objectives. So I sent you a sample. I'm hoping that's what we end up, something like that we can build into a structure like that. And then staff will go on the backside, create an operations or tactical plan, how we're going to accomplish those. And then that's what we'll start reporting on. Once this is done, council will adopt the plan, we'll come up with a tactical plan, you'll say, yeah, that works. We'll report quarterly on that, how we're doing with that. And then probably after every election, my suggestion is that we review this strategic plan with the council, whoever's sitting at the time, to make sure it's still what everybody wants to do. Because this is really gonna guide a lot of our work as staff to try and move towards your vision. So and it can change, it's fine, frankly, we should be willing to change it, because if it's set in stone, we may not. We may get someplace and realize that's not where we want it to be. So, let's see if this works. Alright, so some underlying assumptions, just to keep in mind as we do this. Whatever we do, we have to be financially sustainable, so if we don't say it, that's an understood. So we don't have to call out everyone, well, as long as it's financially sustainable. That will be one of the key things that just has to happen, right? Some level of service is a given. If you have city parks, you have to pick up trash, right? So there's certain things that are a given, so we don't have to spend time talking about base level all the time, because it's just something we have to do. And the same will come true with infrastructure and those things. So as you're thinking this, there's short term, 1 to 2 years, but it's Scott here, he called it the speed of government this morning. 1 to 2 years, short term, mid-term, 2 to 5 years, long term is 5 years plus. I think it's good to have, a very aspirational long-term goal that you can't do short term. It takes a while to get there. Jim Collins would call it your big, hairy, audacious goal. Anybody's read his stuff? So if you've read his stuff, you might also know this. This is more of a 20-mile march than it is a sprint. So this is the story of Scott and Amundsen as they raced to the South Pole. If you know that story, Scott had all sorts of cool stuff, and if it was good weather, he'd go 40, 50 miles in a day. If it was bad, he would stop. Amundsen's people got up and they went 20 miles every day, regardless of the weather. He got to the pole, got back safely. Scott got to the pole, we know this. He died, we know that because we found his journal, and they didn't make it. So it's more sprinting, it takes time. be consistent, dedicated, we're gonna do the march. Even if it feels like, wow, we could sprint, we should just continue to make progress, work in the goal. So the 20-mile march, I think that's in his, Great by Choice. Anybody wants to read Jim Collins' book, he does a better job telling the story, makes it exciting.
There's even a more simple book called The Turtle and the Hare.
Yeah.
That's my kind of book.
So, we can go fast, we can go slow, but we just wanna make sure we're going in the same direction and we don't get, you can also say this is the squirrel moment. So we wanna make sure we don't have squirrels. I can't remember, is it Clearfield, one of them, they talk about squirrels, when somebody will come to council, ask for something, and they'll say, yeah, it's a really good idea, but is it a squirrel? If you remember Up, we have the Up House, we should all have watched Up, so. So our first thing, after we do all this, my preference as staff is we're gonna focus first on finding things that are effective, and then we'll focus on how to make those efficient, because, nothing more frustrating than being super efficient at something that's completely ineffective or worthless. There's all sorts of things we do super, super well, and then we realize, well, we don't actually need to do them, but we do them really well. So we wanna avoid that as much as possible. And then this really is just, in my mind, these can shift around, but I just wanna make sure we have a common kind of nomenclature for what we're talking about. I have objectives, some people call them tasks. I don't care, whatever council wants to call them, once we figure it out, then we'll use that same language all the time, so that it doesn't get too confusing. So we're working towards things. So, with that, we're gonna do some interactive. We're not doing any role plays, I promise. But I do want you, so, I'm gonna have you write down on these Post-it cards, so they do hand out about 6 to each of the, so here's a question first. It depends on you, do you want your staff to participate, or do you wanna do this just council? Doesn't matter to me, but it's just, depends on who we hand out stuff to.
No, I personally don't care if staff, the more I do, the better.
I would love staff to do.
Overall.
Especially chief.
You want chief?
Just
Just chief, so you can hand out 4 to 6, and you don't have to do all 4 or 6, you'll find out why. With pens, they're all the same color. Well, no, I don't know your handwriting, so there is some anonymity to this. So write down what you think, and then you'll see how we do this. Actually, we can do it quick, we're gonna end up at a break pretty fast.
Put one on each card.
Yeah, write down, you can just write it down on there, and then you'll see what we do. We're gonna do some,
Sounds funny.
it's called Pareto Optimal Voting, you're gonna love it.
You told me about it.
Sounds complicated.
The whys of what the city should be doing.
Yeah, what are those top levels, what do you want to do?
Okay.
So in the sample I gave you was, safe, people feel safe at home about
Right.
those kind of things. You guys gonna participate, need,
we're doing this?
yeah, if staff wants
Do
to,
you guys want
I'd
copies
say
of this,
they can-
hard copies? Free provide.
I give them all, just take a hand of,
Okay, you sure?
those squirrels aren't gonna help you because they'll see what we're doing.
Just pass it down. You guys are only getting 4. There's another. Ask them to take 4, take the staff,
Oh,
pass
we
them down.
take 4 each?
Yes,
So we take,
there's 4 in a stack.
sorry. I'm not sure how many I just gave you.
You're gonna get him 3?
Yes.
I'll keep mine 4 then. I only got 1.
She needs 1.
Doesn't matter, you'll see how we,
That's 4.
if you give me 2
There's
or
one.
10,
Okay.
Here's 1, here's 4.
you still have to vote.
Okay.
I'll go down the other end.
Alright.
I should give you that.
So we're just writing 1 on each of these
Yeah,
cards?
1 on each card. More squirrels. Just don't do 2 on a card, that gets confusing. Alright, you have about 10 minutes. Unless you want, I'll give you 15 if you'd rather have 15. I just wanna make sure we're moving along. Of course, there's gonna be. Scissors.
I'm getting texts from residents.
About this?
They want,
Oh, good.
can you visit with resident Wendy?
You have scissors in your office.
Hi, Chris.
I'll distract him.
Do you have spell check on these?
It automatically underlines in red.
Okay.
We'll, if we put them in the document, we'll fix all that, don't worry about it.
Who knows how to spell? How to frame it in a Y, like being on Jeopardy and framing.
Just write it down however you want, don't worry about, there's not a format you have to do, just.
Well, I believe in limited government, so I only have two.
Somebody would have shoveled it good. Trying flying cars. Drone deliveries.
No.
That would fix our traffic if we have flying cars. What could possibly go wrong with thousands of cars flying overhead all the time?
Road rage in the sky would be fun.
Well, I know that the asphalt costs be way less.
The Teslas worked out
Whose
so
fault?
well on autopilot.
Asphalt.
Right.
What can happen at 800 miles an hour?
Yeah, your traffic, your collisions would be a little different to investigate.
They'd be spread over several people's yards.
Yeah, you just give them to the F.
Could you imagine?
Perfect. You wouldn't even have to, the FAA could go.
I think we all wear those space bubbles, so when we fall out of the sky, we just bounce.
The airbag would turn into an air ball, it would
Yeah.
just eject you and.
Like the avalanche snowsuits.
So if people are done, you can, if you're done, you can start handing them in,
You don't have to do all
You don't
that.
have to, you can just help me with this next bit. It's just sorting real quick.
What if you can't read my writing?
More money for police budget, since well for you.
Then I'll know who it is and we'll ask you.
Ooh, tasers.
What do you need help with?
More tasers.
So we're gonna,
Lay the fire department off.
Yeah.
Just.
what'd you say?
Put the police in charge of the fire department.
They're sticky, aren't they?
Then my guys are going to sleep all the time.
Here's the other one.
Wow.
So, start trying to group them,
Group
and we're gonna stick them on this, we'll tape them to these, one of these, we'll get everybody's regular elections.
Is it already?
Takes a while.
You get 10 minutes.
You said that.
Yeah, we're gonna do categories.
Yeah, we're trying to group them into themes, so when we put them up there, you can see them all together.
What are your themes?
We're just trying to, architects always have nice these,
Mine are not
it's usually
big.
to read those. So it like looks cool, but sometimes it's really hard to read. My dad had really good engineering. All capitals, all perfectly spaced,
Yeah.
like Jonathan. Is that? My handwriting sucks.
Should reason that? Yes.
Development?
Yeah, we can move them as we do it. It's all apps.
Who used a real pen?
You can't ask. And that also, so they kind of feel into this area, so. Yeah. Yeah, they're not moving big. Yeah, let's slide those to that.
That's good.
Well, I can tell who some of these
We gotta
are.
read yours first.
It won't be very secret.
Design, I guess that's infrastructure.
I think that's Blake's.
No. This is.
Oh.
No deciphering, you said that.
It looks like engineer handwriting.
I'm just laughing.
Handwriting.
No, whoever wrote it
Yeah,
was
you
funny.
can tell, a lot of these I can tell who it is.
Do we have any vacancies?
Did you say bacon or vacancy? Oh,
Vacancy?
I was like.
Bacon,
Oh, sorry.
bacon maple, bacon donuts.
You did the city?
Yeah, he's in our police department.
Really?
He's big dude.
Isaac.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Isaac?
He is.
Nick.
He's
Hightower?
So we feel that
I'm not
as
a
our.
Oh, not tall, but he's just,
What about SROs? Did you find, we still splitting?
all those Asiata boys are
We
big.
still have an opening,
No, we were able to
redesign
ask
them.
somebody to help us out and redesign it a little bit to
So-
cover it for this year.
Maybe we need another one.
That ask had an explanation.
I went out
Would
there
be a
by
good
it, looked
thing.
at it, and I.
And we, once we kinda get them, then we may sort through.
I actually, did you meet Isaac?
Yeah.
But the,
It's in, I couldn't,
but I'm wondering if Silver Spruce just
find
find
out.
that
We may need
more equipment here when we're not on a project.
Look at mine, it's just by itself, it says, create
Silver
legislation.
Spur is similar.
Not impede liberty, no. No.
I like it.
I'd be disappointed if there's no workload for it.
So Blake, what's this one?
Stop it.
Being
with neighbors.
We're gonna stick.
How we're gonna transition from
Yeah, it takes some
city
time.
to be in infill and like long-range things. How do we prioritize our development, like really housing, what type of housing, retail or job creation, what's the goal on that, so we know that developers.
How far back this thing spread out, you know, sometimes you hit what you hit. Yeah, exactly. Oh, it's a bad day.
They're in the middle.
Actually,
Yeah, I was gonna say, it was
so
like,
bad
I know
everywhere.
values.
What do we wanna do when we grow up?
I will have you study so you can.
I might have gotten that.
This man's the.
There's
no wrong answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of stuff, like discussion, stag recently with transit and stuff.
I remember saying
I think
no
we're
was
gonna
right
start working
after
on
I
it.
Cause I was starting to
Close,
study.
like, because we're gonna start doing a lot of regional stuff.
That's what happened. The spray.
Not enough now.
Say Sneaky.
Exactly, it does like this, it says that we say that we defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Utah.
I continue to maintain pushing density on
I just
West
said,
Bank.
I wonder how many like districts I've ever really used.
They
did that,
major corridors.
with that house usually gathered all of our guests.
That was for sure, but it's like, but as elected officials, we also, you can do
So that they can see the
that.
We think those are good.
Yeah.
Good, we can start with stations. There we can take them on.
Just interesting.
Don't you need
We make some laws and stuff.
I think we could keep it.
Yeah.
Vote that.
You know, I had a press release from Prince and Stratton.
Even when we are sworn in.
I mean, it,
generated
My conversation.
The children around, we should be okay.
even though it may have been unpopular, whatever you say, it at least got people to reach out to him and say, hey, wait, why do you go?
Whatever you want.
Pull it off.
Been out there?
We didn't have to be so violent.
yeah.
Sticking in here.
Nathan, or just not toss it, so we can move it around.
They can just be in a row as long as you can see them.
South of Newbie Highway until so our whole discussion with consultants before the Rockland Bridge.
If we want to title it.
Then you start a different race, or you start a different page. Just pick it up.
And just because the environmental.
We can solve it. I,
As long as you can read it all, we should be okay.
Don't leave me and Wendy alone on the same thing.
Children.
Or at least it wasn't. It was not like, it's consistently been expressed. It's just like,
This is a test.
relationship with Carlton. I said, I don't know what's going on, something's changed in this operation. And I
do.
and it's still the same.
Yeah, let's put them up in a spot where
Yeah,
people.
and I like the flexibility, I like the, that's our solution.
It is suck if all the paint.
Well, I shouldn't give you red.
Yeah, don't give us that.
As Monty passes out,
Of course, it's
more painting.
3 times or 4 times. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That's about my conversation.
Just knock our drink over too now?
Oh, yeah.
It's just water.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what I accept.
Fine.
Anybody can wallet.
Throw out his back?
Which one are you guys, which
I'm
one
getting
are
the
you?
quality one better.
Still doing quality of life?
Yeah.
These are. That second page there. This one, this there.
But I was just EPA do a license survey of the parking right
But you post
We
on.
were really high. Yeah, this, yeah.
Is that big?
It's weird we don't have our own.
Like boarding.
Small cities that have one.
Whenever I
Yeah.
of course that would require vacation.
I agree with the zoo.
I wanted to.
At one point in my career.
To a laser show.
Zoos are like airports.
It's like the more new.
So I ended up having to call people.
I just,
So.
it's not the big thing you have to do.
Reports camel in.
You use it once a year at Christmas.
Yeah,
That sounds
we can pull them off, but that's fine to put them on there.
Is that it, Justin?
So there's these three.
Those are kind of others.
Yeah, it's all the fun.
Stick those up in a second.
He's just
Kids make us stop in Scipio every time we go
There's
down there.
others?
Stuff on
I can't, can you read it?
What is up with this? You sent me the frozen beef patties.
One at a time.
I did not, I just knocked it over. In the sense of moving, yes.
There's no way on the other side of it. But somebody goes over there.
Hey, at least we all had similar categories.
Well, there, it usually works out, but we. Get to do here in a second. It doesn't really matter what category, we're just trying to group them to help you when you're voting. That they're all kind of similar, we think, or at least related. Distant cousins.
Or kissing cousins.
I knew from Arkansas they don't have to do that distance.
Go Hawks.
Dude, we put a curve on UAU, wow. Big.
It's a Utah game though.
Well, I watched it.
The sad thing is to watch a middle tier SEC team like anybody else. And you just think,
Well, they play
I'll
with
stick
the-
out.
Play those top tier SEC teams, is it?
Nathan, do you wanna
Like I
just
said, I
hold on?
think some of them could beat some pro. There's a couple of those pro
No.
teams that are pretty terrible.
You know what?
They could probably be the Broncos.
Right now,
Especially if they go to overtime.
right now, yeah, it's pretty bad.
Not the Jets this year, but the Jets, the Browns in years past.
I mean, the hard part is that even as
It's a different level though.
Yeah, you look at Alabama and you think, okay, they get 6 or 7 guys drafted. Where a pro team has 50 guys involved.
Well, you always think about the last guy sitting on the bench in the pro team. It's like, oh, he's terrible. He was drafted.
Yeah.
He was like the star.
Yeah.
I had a friend from back home, he got drafted and then put on the bench, he was the dummy that you beat up on practice spots.
We had one guy come speak to us and he said he never played. He would play slot receiver against Chance Bailey. And he said the only up into related concepts. There's probably some argument that they could move. So we've done that. You each have some stickers. Take probably 10 minutes or so. Well, we did this actually. Flip it else. Read them and vote. Put your sticker. You could put all your stickers on one. Spread them out. But look at them and say, okay, which of these? And there are some of these that are fairly similar. You say, well, these are all similar. If one gets a vote, we'd probably kind of merge those concepts. But this is an opportunity, so you don't have enough stickers to vote for all of them. So we may have to do. You got 10? Should have 5 stickers. So let's start with 5.
Should've just shut
I'm
up.
gonna let you vote. You grab
Put
some.
on there, if you both don't vote for it,
Isn't that,
that I fell.
this isn't
with the
Chicago,
plan.
right?
That's right.
Depends,
I'm voting for all those counselors
Tell
who
me which one
passed
it is.
on.
exactly.
Hopefully you see it, hopefully. it-
Somebody has to vote for them.
I use some fancy
Who has more
words.
in their district?
okay.
From my
That have
planning
more
units.
sense than before.
So,
Okay,
get up, you can read them, think about it, put your stickers where you're gonna go, and we'll, when everybody's voted, then we'll
Like,
We'll actually
get a little
have to
friendly
start
over here.
tallying some of this up.
You'll be fine.
That's what they keep saying, Jackie. Not on the page, right?
Yeah, so you want the sticker kind of on, because if it's a specific item in there, and the wording, put it on that wording, sorry.
Hey Jared, you gotta come fix your stickers.
Why is that?
So put it on the, either right next to, is this the card you're voting for?
Well, public safety and so the
So put
one
it on
down
there, cause
is
we're gonna
public-
start,
Public basic services,
this
financial
one right here,
stewardship.
this one goes here.
Public services, 3. Financial stewardship, 2.
Oh, okay. Is there a specific wording up here that you want to vote for? Just this top one?
What I just said.
I'm staying out of it. They're, the way you
I'm
define
just
this card.
one of those, you don't take your chances, right? Including a penalty.
Yeah.
And then the second half, same thing. Just had a chance. Couldn't put the ball in the net. They get it.
It may take a while for people to read them and vote. I'll be back.
One, no. Well, I was just.
One
just
nothing.
trying to-
Oh,
Who was it? That's how it started.
legislative.
It's my first time
way because I was involved in
Did you
placing
never?
them, so.
That shouldn't, you shouldn't have been, the bracket should.
We were first in ours, right? We scored like 15 goals.
Right.
And they lost to our second team.
Oh.
all those ideas, we ended up only taking the ones with more than one dot, cause we figured those are the ones that more than one person liked. This one does win with 9 votes. But it's also got basic needs, which is very similar to basic services, so I would almost say that you have 11 votes for that same concept.
I just felt bad for that other card, but he didn't have as many as the other ones, so I put it on, same thing though, right?
Police
Maybe-
services.
Yeah, we should write on the,
Five.
on the flavor.
You can get out of it. We're not gonna have a jury trial. He got jury.
So- It's fine if we shorten that to just basic services,
Not once, not even.
Yes.
so that's that concept.
I liked it how basic services implied parks and trails as well. I mean,
Yeah, it
I
has
think
a,
for our
it has a
community,
very,
that's elemental.
There's not like
broad,
that.
I say almost the foundational things
Yeah.
that are neat, so there are 9, I'm gonna call it 11, I'm gonna combine these two, cause they're so similar.
Police has 5,
Unless they
that's
have
kind of the same thing too, right in the middle.
They've got 5, and that's actually in this
Do that,
one,
yeah.
so yeah, maybe that's all, so it's actually 16 votes. Do that.
But would like public safety be in the basic services? Is that what
Yeah.
you're thinking?
I think it is.
Sure,
I think I don't know how you
have services
yeah.
without.
not have it as a basic, unless you just don't offer that service, right? You're not you contract or a county does your services, but we don't.
But
have
even
that
still,
work.
you're still,
It's still part of basic
Well,
services.
it
what
has,
you're doing.
the fourth little thing is public safety. So
Yeah, there's public safety over here, so that's good, so let's actually get this concept has 16 votes, that's pretty good. What else has, trying to think what else has, financial sustainability has 5. Oh, here's another basic services. Don't get distracted by glitzy ideas, okay? So really, we're seeing this basic services, we'll have to figure out how we word this. But, so basic services I think is gonna be one of your key ones. We have provide a healthy environment for families to raise, quality of life. Those are similar.
Community
community outreach engagement. Bottom left corner.
Okay. So this is placemaking. Placemaking can be part of that
as well, yeah.
quality of life. So we call it quality of life. You come add these up one by one. I was gonna have Kyle write, cause he has nice handwriting. We talked about this, we were doing rock paper scissors to see who was gonna write on the board and I forgot, sorry.
You were holding
handwriting's
auditions.
great.
Yeah.
Blake.
Blake has
Oh, Blake has the handwriting, that's who
Doesn't look
got,
as good as that.
that's who we were gonna do that to.
We need a new
Yeah,
flow
I'm just
chart,
saying how many
Blake.
we have. Where we at? These ones, there's 3, 6. Oh, down here. Well, just these quality of life ones. Yeah, I would put that.
is public health part of quality of life?
I think that's almost a.
Healthy
yeah,
life,
almost
unhealthy
safety.
lifestyle.
Basic
It almost becomes a health, as this almost fits into this, some level under this basic service, what is our role, but.
Yeah, it's kind of both, cause quality of life sucks if you're not healthy.
Then we have,
Number 2.
of the, you've got fiscal sustainability and accountability, that's 7 there. Connectivity. What's the other
There's
one?
another
There's one.
effective
Effective transportation.
Effective transportation, so there's
5.
5.
Well, does
Activity.
effective transportation go with basic services, cause it has a component of roads on there too?
second
Good,
thing. is
right?
roads.
I mean, I think when you talk quality of life, it's really hard to have this amazing place if your infrastructure is
Yeah.
terrible,
One depends on the other.
right? Cause you can't, your people are like, oh, we have beautiful parks, but I can't get to them unless I have a 4-wheel drive. There is kind of this basic concept that we think about, so.
I can't get to them because
Or
there's so
amazing
much
roads that
crime
go
in
to
our
nowhere.
city.
Well, you can have beautiful roads, but there's nothing to do, right, other than drive on them. Yeah, those,
Yeah.
that's, I
If
think
you
they're
don't
kind
have
of
good
this.
police service, it doesn't do any good to have a trail, cause you might get not good on it.
There is a lot that, very few of these are gonna be in vacuum that you can just take, oh, let's just focus on one, it kind of flows together, but this, as we start to categorize, I think will help as we try to come up with what we mean by this. And then, so we have quality of life,
Fiscal responsibility is
we
kind
have
of.
finances. So put fiscal. And then we had community, yeah, those are.
There's aspects of fiscal things that are sustainable, balanced, right? Responsible, there's all kinds of words in it.
Like 3.
Community, how many we have on that? So just gonna see engagements and trends. For quality of life. Might have. Okay, we should, so community and quality of life might actually already be, I may have already counted those in there. Well, high performing government, so there's 5, let's call that engagement.
High performing government?
Yeah.
Perform?
So we should say that, we're often told to act like a business, but then nobody wants us to actually run like a business, cause in a business, we'd be trying to make money, we'd be doing things, so we may wanna define what, if we go with one of these, what we actually mean. So you've all voted. Let's, so jumped ahead here, let's figure out what these strategies would look like. We can actually write something down, how would we define, how are we gonna define this one? Everybody likes this. How do we define this in a way that we can build goals off of it? What does success look like with basic services? Is that as a category, does it work as a category? First of all, when you're thinking, okay, how do you do basic services?
Is it a matter of identifying what is essential and what is optional?
Or it could be that, it could be what is this level that you're shooting for?
I think it's one of those things that if there's a failure in any one of those things, it's a disaster, right? I mean, if you're water, power, sewer, police, fire, any of those stuff fail, it's the community's failing, right? And that's just as bad as it gets.
Throwing them everywhere, chief. So.
Those are the things you cannot fail at.
So what does success look like with basic services? Maybe that's a better question for us. What are we, cause I think you're exactly
I think
right. What is
it's
success?
It's a lower in some ways, it's an easier to define threshold, but it's a threshold of perfection almost, right? I mean, that's what our communities have expected.
Well, it's hard because roads, we have a D grade. That's our goal.
Only on certain roads.
That's our goal, right?
Like
Like our
Level
goal
of
is.
service E, cause we adopted it a long time ago, so if we try to change it higher, the development
we
community will
here?
come back and
So you
clobber us
have
for all our impact fees.
level of service, there's a bunch of things that fit up, but so a citizen one doesn't care what the level of service is, right? Whatever letter grade we gave it, they really don't care what our PCI is. They wanna know, how's the road drive when I drive on it, and can I get to where I'm going in a reasonable amount of time?
But that's all defined in the grade. in
Right,
the-
so those become almost ways we measure.
Right.
So, but what does success for us look like? Right, if we took that measurement, so I'm trying to tease out, cause I think
Right.
I understand where you're trying to go. But I don't wanna get fixated on, we met the letter grade over here. You know, we met this engineering standard, and people said, it's still terrible, but we met our standard, we did it.
That's measurable. Cause everybody's not gonna,
We'll
everybody wants an A.
If you're looking
we'll
for,
have to get measurable, but I
if
think
you're
what I'm-
looking for words or
yeah,
feelings
what is,
to
how do we
associate with-
define this? What is it that we want when we say we're shooting for this? So we don't want, I think I inadvertently put in here, adequate infrastructure. Does anybody know what
What does that mean?
definition of adequate means?
It
Barely
works.
sufficient. It's not, it's a great federal word for like HUD uses adequate a lot, but it just means it's just barely there.
You can make it there.
So that's probably not the right one. I mean, it might be, but how do you define, how do you,
I was gonna say,
how are you gonna get there?
those things have to work reliably, right?
viable?
But you can't, when like Steve just said, if I turn on the faucet, I don't wanna be thinking, my gosh, I hope it turns on today, or I hope I have decent pressure.
Or have to boil it. Or
Right.
Right.
I drive down so from the community point of view, if I drive down my road every day and I've gotta go to the chiropractor by the time I get home, like I'm pissed off about everything the city does. Right? It's not just roads, right? And that's what we've lived so about the new road is so great.
You start with the road and then it's gonna be the
But
color of our logo
that's what
by
it
the
is,
time
right?
it's
And
done, right?
if my water pressure isn't sufficient, my lawn's dead, cause there's no pressure, right? If the neighbors run their washing machine and the sprinklers won't turn on, I'm pissed at everything the city does. Right? So it's those things that if they don't work, then everything we do is bad.
So it's kind of this. It's
They're
a concept.
non-negotiable, right? There's no,
They are essential.
Yeah,
people
so
can argue about whether or not, how big a park should be and what amenities should be in the park and you know, that kind of stuff. But people don't argue about whether or not their water should turn on.
But it's the same thing as one of your very first slides. It's just basic. These
Yeah.
things have to be there.
So there is some level of, so as we start to talk about levels of service, we may say, okay, we need, so when we're saying we want to
Some service
focus
levels are-
to make sure these are here, we want it reliable, we want, because in this vote, whoever got the most votes had water, roads, public safety, parks, public open space, they gave a long list of essential things that kind of make a community. So when we say this, what are we, so under this, we can have all sorts of goals to meet it, but we want something reliable, we want something, I always see, these are the ones the citizens don't want to think about.
Let me just throw this, yeah,
Right,
exactly.
'cause
Let
it
me
works.
just- Right, let me just throw this out as a thing, is you use the word, some service levels are a given. I think you just have to assume that these are a have to. They're a given. They have to work every time.
But I think we
Yeah.
can do that through a couple different metrics, and we provide basic services, financially stable, with the education and staff members that know how to keep us up to date and keep us on the forefront, right? So I think just providing basic service is great, but doing it in a responsible, sustainable way is probably what we need to focus on, right? Cause we can go spend millions of dollars on roads that work great, but.
Well, we could if we had none.
Exactly.
Innovative.
Well, and those are not good or bad, but those are qualitative things.
Yeah.
And I suppose that there's a way to be quantitative about what those mean.
Yeah,
How
and
we
yeah.
define each one of those things, but,
I think at the strategy level, you are qualitative.
right.
And then as you come to goals and you start to build down, you start to build those measurable, like,
Objectives.
we'll
Right, the
use,
objectives, right.
we will use PCI as a measurement because we can measure it. But ultimately, we're also probably surveying citizens, if we're doing roads, how do they like them, right? Does it work? Cause we can have a high PCI, but the road doesn't look good and so people feel bad about it and it doesn't, so the PCI is a proxy to measure how people feel. And so we'll use those, I think, as we build into this, but really, like, we're looking for some concepts at this strategy, so, the end goal was defeat Germany, then Eisenhower said, we're invading, and then there are all these things they built down to how to do it, but the first one is, here's what we want. So I'm hearing basic services, maybe replace basic with reliable, responsible.
Yeah, one of the things too, I know, Chief did this in the police department a lot, was really forward thinking, right? You're always trying to stay ahead. Same with water, we've let out on the conservation thing, so
Well, you've got
those
innovative.
types of things that are infrastructure type of things, are we always forward thinking, are we looking ahead and staying ahead of trying to, while being fiscally responsible, but that is being fiscally responsible, trying to say, even like with public transportation, do we really want tracks here? What are the pluses, what are the minuses of that? Really thinking ahead and being forward thinking, is there a better option kind of thing? Trying to think ahead all the time to make sure that we, because I think in the long run, it saves us money.
Yeah, Sharon, I think that's a good point, cause when we were talking about, broadband infrastructure,
Yes.
we really had to expand our thinking in the horizon of what could be accomplished with that,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
I like the proactive word, just
It's innovative forward thinking, same thing.
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah,
same kind
But
of
it's that idea that you're not,
process.
so we're talking,
You're ahead of things, not behind things.
so and I don't wanna put words in whoever wrote this. These are things we do, that we have to do. How do we deliver them, right? Do we go about to that adequate, just barely sufficient, meet the standard, you've got a road, don't complain, right? It might be a PCI 12, but it's a road, right? It's a basic service, you have it. I mean, I think we see that in some communities, well, you've got your road, that's what it is. Or are we trying to, when we say this, and I don't know who wrote it, but and you all voted for it, are you thinking beyond that base level that here's a road? This is a road that people like, or it's the service, it's at a level that people are comfortable and expect. I mean, there's this whole financial sustainability piece that has to go into that, but is that what we're trying
I
to
think you
think
supplied basic services, but at an exceptional pace or environment. So the road might suck, but we understand it sucks and we have a plan to fix it, right? And our staff does an amazing job at snow plowing and chip sealing and all the other auxiliary services that pertain to that road or that service.
Okay.
Do we need to identify what basic services are?
Good. I have a list here that everybody will, for water, roads, public safety, parks, public open space. Within that, so if we were doing a budgeting for priorities, you'd say, yeah, do that. People still wanna get paid, so you have to have finance, right? You have to have. That's always the challenge when we're saying what specific service or program you're doing. But are you okay with this list? I mean, a lot of you voted for it. Is it an okay list? Is there something missing off that? Or something that should be added or taken away?
Water, sewer, power, public safety,
Safety, I was gonna say it's public safety on
right?
that.
Yeah, it's on
Public safety's up there,
sewer,
parks, open
sewer
space.
is not on there, I would assume because we
We
don't
don't
do
do it.
anything with the sewer.
Oh, yeah, we don't do,
It's just one
we
of
don't do
those.
power though.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Same with garbage, it's not
yeah,
on
garbage
there.
is
Right,
on
garbage is
there,
not, right.
yeah.
utilities.
I mean, you could, as we define it, we could put down, we wanna
Provide
provide,
access for-
these are here.
Yeah.
Again, it's that concept. If we do this really, really well, the citizens won't
Have no
ever
idea.
say thank you because they won't think about it. It just is what they expect. It happens. You turn the water on, it works. You drive the roads fine. We work ourselves into anonymity, which is frankly what we should.
Our
That's our job, right? We're trying to do this. So we're worrying about this, they don't have to. So we can
Give us an
build a
idea.
concept around this services.
We're not good at this.
I wonder if, because Parks is in that basic services on that card, is that a basic service or is that a quality of life?
I think that's one of the things that probably starts the transition between a basic service and a quality of life issue where it's, I mean, all of these are quality of life issues, but, if you do everything right, but you don't have a park, I think that's a basic, right? But I don't know that anybody is gonna be excited about living if there's no park, if there's no open space, if there's nothing like that in the community. I think we've talked about this so many times and there's a lot of research to suggest the relationship between access to green and open spaces and mental health issues in your community and quality of life. So I think that's probably right on the border between the two, if that makes sense.
Well, we have a master plan for that too, you know, anything that we have a master plan for in our community.
Yeah, that's true. That's part of our,
It's a component of,
So,
but I believe that is government's job. All this other stuff can be the fluff, but that to me is our primary responsibility, that's why we're here. And so that people can forget we're even here, and that's fine, because our job is to provide that kind of stuff with being fiscally responsible so that we do provide that stuff. If there's extra left over, then we can get to look at the other stuff.
so here's just a question, just a thought. Is quality of life under basic services, or do basic services fall under quality of life?
It definitely is one of the.
How do citizens look at it?
It's probably upside down from what we have there.
probably.
Yeah.
I think
Quality of life.
I think it's services first, because that's what gives you the quality of life.
Yeah, so if you have this, do you get this?
Yes.
It's hard to have this.
If
You
don't
can,
have any
you
of those
can
things.
amplify that,
Without
once you have the services in place, that's your basic quality of life, and then you can add extra things on if you have the means to.
So then we're talking about maybe moving beyond. So as I'm thinking about this, I'm wondering if our goal is it basic services, or is it, we're saying this and this is how it's supported. You have to do
Yeah.
this,
I agree with
and then if there's,
To provide
if you want
that.
if you wanna plus this up on something, maybe there are some other areas, but I've been in a lot of places, who was joking about the live, thrive, and, or was
Work,
it
live,
live, love, or what, not live,
Live,
love,
love,
not the same thing, right? You can't have those kind of things.
You pray love is over.
It's almost impossible when there's something broken on this side.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Because
dependent on
this
that.
is what people see.
you. Right, and that's what I'm saying, if one of those things isn't working right, everything else is terrible.
Can I throw a wrench? What about development? Cause if you're talking about quality of life and basic services, proper planning and proper community development is,
See, now we're starting to move into these goals under it,
yeah.
because I think that's key. So if just hazard, because this quality of life one that we're talking about, it's a wonderful place to live, people want to be here, that this almost becomes what you're really shooting for.
Yeah.
And this is this is one of the key pieces to deliver it, because if these fail, this is just the little
Put it into
saying
your-
you put in your kitchen, right?
Use
Just
your
do it.
words from a previous slide, I'd say the quality of life is the aspirational goal, right?
Right.
And then what are the things that support it?
I mean, I can really see this whole conversation being, everything is related to that, right? Everything is quality of life issue, even the fiscal responsibility, right? Because it
If
has
you're
to
being
do with
taxed too
taxes
much,
and all that other kind of stuff too, right? So,
Or if there's no community involvement or engagement or.
right. People, if you have a good quality of life,
So how do you define quality of life? How do you
So
define good
there's
quality
there's
of
an
life?
opportunity cost, right, to each decision. So, example, I'll give you something Nathan and I were talking about the other day. I told him, look, when it comes to, we're talking about the roads, cause our one road around me finally got done. So I can't tell you how many people I've had that comment of, I don't have to go to the chiropractor anymore. But it affects everything. So the comments I've gotten from people a lot over the years is, I see all this stuff about these fun events and everything we're spending all this money on, but how come my road can't get fixed? Right? And those things are important and we need that community involvement, engagement, but where does that, in our decision-making metrics, right? Where's the line? Like what resources do we put towards one thing and sacrifice another, I think is kind of what we're talking about. So what's the level of those basic services that people feel good about those basic things, and then we can add the others to it.
And I think so if, as Steve said, if this becomes So we want a high quality of life. That's the outcome we're after. Right? We have to talk about how we measure all that, but then underneath that, we have to have reliable services. Maybe that becomes its own area. We're gonna have these services here. Fiscal, we can put in how those fit, although sometimes this one ends up in every one of those other
Yeah.
conversations.
Has to.
Right.
Right, because it just, let's go fix every road in town. Okay, Kyle, how are we
But
gonna do that, Alan?
I
Figure
think
that
there's a
out.
part of this
We got
that,
bond, right?
that might even be a more qualitative issue, not such a quantitative, but a qualitative issue on quality of life is, you know, we talked about, you know, sustainable, budgets, right? Sustainable economy, a broad base, a tax base, you know, those kind of things. Those are issues for quality, or for the fiscal quality of life, right? But there are also issues where if you have a balanced tax base, if you've developed well, you also have a better quality of life because there's services available,
Everything's
there's,
closer.
yeah, you don't have to travel 15 miles to go to lunch, you know, that kind of stuff, so, but I would say that those are, more aspirational than the reliable services part of that conversation.
Don't you think we have to define quality of life?
So I think that's a great, when we say, so I've done this long enough to know that whenever somebody wants something from a council, they're gonna tell you it's related to economic development or quality of life. 'Cause those are both very
Or the children are
squishy.
gonna die.
Yes, women and children.
Women and children will die, right?
So that's the other,
That's the
that's
cost,
the
that's the
public
cost,
safety.
telling you that.
It's how do you define, what do you
Usually
mean by
companies budget
quality
plus.
of life?
Right.
What is it that, what do you think your constituents, when somebody says, I want a high quality of life, what do they mean?
So a lot of times when that phrase quality of life is used in community planning, typically we're talking about betterments. Typically it's about enhancements, you know, it's a better quality of life that we wanna talk about, not just standard or poor, right? Maybe that's a way that we kind of break this conversation down, and you've been hinting at it already, you've been saying there's a basic level of service. Maybe we've gotta figure out how to define that, and then a quality of life issue is an enhancement, right? It sounds like we're saying we want to do more than just the basic services, but the basic services are the priority. We have to deliver that first, and we have to do it well enough that it meets the expectation of our community, right?
Right, so part of that, I mean, if we're talking about strategic planning, it's not just what's that level now, right? It's, I guess, and especially as we're growing, how do we keep that level as we grow out? Right, so we're talking about
Or do we
road
not meet
maintenance
it
or
today?
what, right?
If we don't meet it today, what,
And
does
that's
it need
easy,
to
right?
be?
To say, well, everything's okay right now. Let's put those resources over
Yeah,
here
our
and
road
then,
still needs a chiropractor.
right?
Okay, yeah.
And five years goes by and we're making the same decision and keep pushing it out, and then we're like some other cities that the roads are, all of them are failing and they'll never catch up.
it's easy to defer the maintenance, and we probably shouldn't call it deferred maintenance, it should probably foregone maintenance, we're just never gonna do it. So there is this concept, so if quality of life becomes kind of this, people want to live here, right? This needs to be, regardless of whatever other challenges we have, tax or whatever, people, it comes down to, what city do you live in around here? They say, I'd rather live in Harriman. I mean, is that eventually, we want the people who live here, it's like, I'm glad I live here and not
Yeah, for sure.
over there. So we have to figure out how we get there, right? I do think we're still in that community of choice, cause people are choosing to move here.
Yep.
But it's also where the houses are being built, right? Right, your choices become Eagle Mountain, Saratoga Springs, Harriman, South Jordan, right? I mean, how do we do that? So quality of life, we can maybe think about how we word a strategy around this, and does this make sense, as Michael said, is that what we're thinking when we?
To me, those are short-term versus long-term, cause to me, it's like what Jared was saying, I think we have to get our roads all up to the non-chiropractic roads. That will be up to the basic level. And then after that, then we figure out how the enhancement comes, how do we make better connectivity or things like that. But we're not to the
So-
basic yet.
I think you're a good point. A road that functions properly is the basic. A road that functions properly, that's connected and works into a regional transportation system and all that stuff is more an enhancement, right?
Yeah,
I
and
get
well,
what you're saying.
and even maintain, because it, just like you said, if we don't have good maintenance on our roads, and we're never covering the basic on it either.
And with some of these things, it will take some time to implement a plan, but if there is a plan, right? And those resources are dedicated, whether it's now or in the future, but it's there and you can communicate that to people, right? And then it actually happens, then that's no longer kinda on their complaint list, if that makes sense, right? You
Yeah.
build that trust with the community that they are gonna do what they say they're gonna do.
You know, that does put certain things into perspective here is that, I'd say, you know, for the basic, inputs for quality of life that we've been talking about, you know, water, power, sewer, blah, blah, blah. I think the one area that we are not quite meeting the level of service there is roads, right? That's an area where we aren't
It's the most
meeting
visible.
that, it's pretty obvious, right? But, I mean, everybody has water.
Yeah, and I think
Everybody
we're
can
doing,
call the police and they're gonna show up, you know?
I think we're doing a good job on our water too, even that the bond we did, just try and improve the pressure zones and things like that, I think we've done some forward thinking on that. Same with police, yeah, I think good point.
But I think, yeah, like Jared, make a plan, show me the plan, perform the plan.
So having a plan to meet these and how we measure and how we get there. I always say that the utilities that are out of sight, out of mind, your water and your sewer, they are, by the time when you see water, unless it's coming out the end of your hose, it's not a good thing.
Yeah.
Right? That's usually,
You
we
see
like to,
sewer.
we like to
that's
keep
even
it in the
worse.
pipes. Yeah, both of those need to stay in their pipes and going in the right direction. So I added one thing in this reliable services, just from my experience, and I don't know if I had this conversation with Tammy, I don't know that communication's the right word, it's really this engagement, how do you share information with citizens in a regular basis so that, because it's usually the unknown, what's happening, what are you doing, that causes, and I think even as counselors, right, if you don't know what's going on, you feel, when you know, even if you don't love the decision, you at least know what's going on, you feel like you have some control, and our citizens are no different, right, they want to know.
So I said that's
You gotta show them what you're doing, yeah.
right, you have to communicate what the plan is, right? And then when those things are, so these are the scheduled projects this summer, like we were talking about this yesterday. Here's a scheduled project this summer, and then you communicate when they're done, right? So
And
we
you
told you we were gonna
over-communicate,
do
yeah.
these things, and we got these things done. If this one didn't happen, this is why, and this is the schedule for it the next time around, sort of thing.
What,
And if
Bryce
we-
or Blake to be on a little video explaining what GSB 88 does for a road, their little hard
But if we get into the cycle,
15-second TikTok.
which I think is easy for cities to do, of giving them an expectation, here's the plan, here's the schedule, and then it doesn't happen for whatever reason, and then it doesn't happen again and again, and that's where people get upset and they
Like the road
lose
Park
trust
Strip.
in what we're doing, right?
Which has happened.
And then I said
before.
that bleeds
Park
into
Strip
all
out
of the
there.
quality of life things. That one thing, so if, Jared, why do I wanna go to a community event if I hate the city cause my road isn't fixed, right?
Build trust on that one.
So
'Cause the
it's-
lights are cool.
It's actually this, trust piece here.
Yeah, cause there's been a lot of shifting on that, there's been things on a budget and then they go away.
But I think if you're communicating that throughout the whole process, right?
It's important that we.
Well, I think of, we're starting to get a larger Venezuelan population, and government and trust don't go together for them. And it has very little to do with us.
It's
It
a
has to
culture
do with
thing,
their
yeah.
experience and they're.
I don't know, I was born and
Okay.
raised here, I've been involved in it, I still don't trust government at all.
But you've probably, I talked to, you've never worried about getting arrested
In
and
fact, I
disappearing
probably
forever,
trust
right?
it less now after.
That's why you don't come to events.
But that, I think is a key thing, is that if we say, okay, we try to, and if you're not going to meet it, then you've communicated, here's what's happening.
Yeah.
Here's what's going on. It's like the people the other day who were supposed to get their sidewalk poured when that truck went on its side. Somebody didn't get their concrete that day. If that happened to us, we need to communicate, hey, this is what happened, there's an accident, we're not gonna be able to do this project today.
And I'm, none of us are saying that, geez, we're terrible because we haven't done any of these things. I think we're just at a stage where we've been, it's kind of the growing pains thing that we've talked about, right? What stage we're at, where we're at that stage where we're still growing, but we're established enough that we need to take a step back and say, okay, what is our plan to take care of these things, knowing what the growth is gonna be? We don't have nearly as many unknowns at this point as we did
How we can perfect from this point forward.
5, 6, 8, 10 years ago, right? And I'm picking on roads, it doesn't mean that our roads people haven't done a good job, but we haven't had a real strategic plan. And I mean, I brought this up several times, and I think it's the same thing for any of these things. If we're adding new roads and our road maintenance budget stays the same, not a good thing, right?
Well, and the other thing about that, it's been reported to us, in order to keep that PCI standard, we need to be spending X million, with 3 million a year or something, and we're spending 900,000 a year or something like that, so, I mean, we're already setting ourselves up for problems down the road, you know?
So that leads as we start to build under, so if quality of life is kind of this over umbrella, that's really where we're after we have these services. I would say community fits probably under that same umbrella. One challenge that we're gonna have to deal with is capacity. So you could put $3 million a year to road work. Whether we can
Do $3 million of, yeah.
hire enough contractor to do 3 million or have the engineering staff to push that many contract. So one big project, we'll spend 10 million on Main, we can count that as the average and we're done a great job. But if it's on that maintenance side, I know how much cat herding do we have to do with the contractor this year?
It's a nightmare.
And so as you think about that, if you were trying to run 3 of those contracts and you rolled the dice and you got lucky and you had similar
Look,
experiences
there's
with all 3,
constraints
it would
on
be like,
everything,
right?
right?
Yeah.
Financial-
So we have to balance that.
Logistics,
But I
financial,
think that
right?
those things are a lot easier to negotiate, right, navigate, than if we're making a decision on the front end to not fund it, right? We're putting those resources towards something else and we're delaying that instead, right? Cause that can be communicated, hey, we budgeted for it, but there's material shortages, there's labor
constraints,
shortages,
yeah.
right? There is a capacity issue, but the funds are there and it's on the schedule for next year. Right? I mean, that's not a failure on our part, right? And that's easily communicated. But the failure on our part, looking at the 5 of us who make decisions on the budget, right, is if we say, no, we're gonna forego that maintenance to do this cool thing over here.
I don't think we've ever had that cool thing though, for, I guess, where we're sitting is a pretty cool thing, but,
Ours.
again, if we don't line item budget maintenance or enough money to carry that basic level of service on anything, I think that's where we fail.
Yeah.
So, and what I'm hearing you is all this, it almost goes to that responsible, how do we maintain what we have? That, to this basic, and then start to figure out, okay, do we have money to do the enhancements? So,
Cause
So-
there is some catching up to do, right? That's
Yeah,
part,
you
has
have-
to be
you
part of the basic plan right now
there's
is,
some deferred maintenance.
yeah, catch up on some of that, right? And at the same time, we're adding new, so it's just, what is that plan?
It's also frustrating because it's not that old.
Well, yeah,
Roads that are less than 20 years old that look like they're 70, maybe it was dog years.
and then new stuff impacts the existing. I call it every day about what are you guys doing with Main Street? You guys are gonna do Olympia and it's gonna, all this traffic is gonna be here, what is going on? So we have to make sure that our current roads are gonna handle the new capacity that's gonna get dumped on them. When they're having a hard time handling what's now.
So again, that's that feeling that's how. So citizens probably don't wanna get involved in drawing cross sections of roads, I think it should be this or that. They want it to work, there's a basic level, so there's a bunch of stuff that we have to do in the background on this. So if we're trying to find three, and I'll tell you why three is usually good. They did a survey of CEOs in their boardroom, they asked them, what are your company values? And they go, boom, boom. And then they start looking around for 4 and 5 and 6, 'cause you can always keep three on top of your head. My goal with this plan is that it's, maximum, it's the executive summary that you usually get of the 400 or 500 pages. So let's just do the executive summary, we'll pretend that we have 400 beautiful pages behind it that nobody was gonna read anyways, and we'll just work off the ones that are up front. And it may only be 10 pages, but, so if to maybe move this along, if quality of life becomes this umbrella, that's really what we're after. Without doing visioning or anything, it's really, we want this to be a place where people want to be, high quality of life, it's hard to define high, but this is almost the judge, I'll know it when I see it. It's hard to define, but I know it when I see it. We're gonna have to, maybe staff come up with, we'll throw some definitions at you or ways to describe it, and you can say, like that, don't like that, or tweak it. So maybe we don't have to do that today. This is a thing for us we're gonna get together staff and try and put some flesh around this so you can look at it and say, yeah, that hits what we're doing. I'm hearing these services are key in how we provide those to a basic level, but understanding we may also, there are times we're gonna want to enhance upon a basic level.
Hey, I just wanna share this thought, but kind of in support of what you're saying here is that, I think when it comes to the basics for a good quality of life, let's just say that, I think the city administration, city staff has done a really, really good job in that area. An outstanding job. And I know that every department would like to enhance what they're doing with all of those things. And I think that as a council, as much as we like the idea of all of the enhancements that could be done to our community, how do we make the community better, prettier, more attractive, how do we get the right kind of businesses, all the stuff that we wanna do to make life even better here. I think that the better plan and control, which is, I know this whole effort is around that, but the more stable footing we have around that basic stuff, I think the easier it is for us to discuss how to enhance the rest of those things.
Right.
And I think that that's where the growing up part of it is we've gotta have a better, well-defined, well-thought-out, agreed-to plan on how to not only create the basics, but sustain the basics, right? And then we have some ability to work on the enhanced stuff that we can do, that we wanna do in this community. And I think that, as a council, and I know staff would have a lot of great ideas around that enhancement stuff. But I think we've we've had challenges with that transition to the enhancement stuff because the basic stuff just hasn't been as well defined as I think it can be. And I think this is a great tool for us to define that better so that we can move forward on that other stuff. And I think that's where it's the difference between survival and thriving, right?
And that's a used word, but it is a thriving community versus a surviving community.
Right.
I mean, I think when you hear those two words, you think of different things. I think that's exactly kind of where we're going here, is how do we create some concepts around here that we can then measure against? So when the squirrels come in, let's do this. Council, and had a conversation with a few of you about, it's hard in a vacuum. You get ideas come to you in a vacuum. Well, this is great. But there's all this other stuff going on that because it hit you in a vacuum, that you maybe not have had time to think about. Think about when people come and ask you for money, and you're like, oh, it's a really good project. And you give them money, and then the next group, there's another group, this is an even better project, but we just gave our money away. We didn't know this was, so there has to be some way to try and make sure that the information, that you're not getting hit in a vacuum, you're not, once we have these goals, you're moving down a path, and a wonderful, worthy thing comes up, but it's not where you wanna be. One of the most important things about strategic planning is what you're doing. The absolute more important is, what do you stop doing?
Right.
What are things that we do today as staff that we're gonna say, we're not doing that anymore?
To me, a lot of that comes back to the opportunity cost, right? So the decision in a vacuum, okay, this thing came up, there's this fire to put out. If we're just looking at that, how do you say no?
Only
Right.
if women and children are done.
So when we talk to people, when I sit down at the table and talk to people about their money, like if you don't have a plan for it, it will disappear, right? If it just all goes into the checking savings account and something comes up, it's hard to tell yourself no, right? But if that money, you know that that's, this much is gonna go towards that account or towards that savings or towards that goal or whatever, and it has a plan, then it's easier to say, well, we could do that, but then that means I'm, foregoing these things. But it's having those basic things in place that helps me with that, I hate to say decision-making matrix, but it is, right? I know that this is the basic plan, this is what's left over for the elective things, then we can look at it from that point of view, right? But I think that's how a lot of, at least for me, that's how a lot of our decisions have been, is we don't have that basic framework, right? It's just brought to us in the vacuum, and we need a decision on this thing, and we don't ask the right questions of how does that affect all of these others.
And I think that I think that council's involvement in this part of it is important, because I think it bridges the gap between the analysis, understanding, and background that staff has done in presenting those ideas.
So they know ahead of
right,
time,
they-
this is where our priority is,
Yeah.
right? That's the first thing, then is it extra that they can make a decision on that?
Right, but I'd say that they do. I think the fact that we may not understand or see some of the details or the bigger picture doesn't mean that is not happening, right? I trust the
But
staff's trying to do a really
yeah,
good
no,
job.
and that's
That's
what I'm saying.
But our ability to be engaged in this process, make sure that what staff is analyzing and what our goals are the same thing, right?
Yeah.
That we're both making decisions based out of that same.
Well, I think that's what this
Checklist.
is for,
Yeah.
is we need to give that direction of this is the starting point, right?
Right.
Wash it through this first, and then we can go there,
Right.
towards the enhancement.
And I think that's and again, choosing not to do things, that is often the harder one. South Jordan gave a presentation at, this last league meeting, and said their hard thing is they went through and they no longer fund their Miss South Jordan pageant. Cause as the council went through and said, yeah, it's wonderful, they just don't, they quit, because it wasn't meeting the needs of the whole community when they went through it. And those are, I'm sure that was a very difficult decision, cause they probably had a constituency in front of them saying, but wait. But, so that's one of the things, when you do this, there will be those good worthy ideas, and so squirrels probably don't, but it's something that distracts you, that you have to say, okay, so this will also help council, so staffs will use whatever we come up with, but council can look at it and say, yes, and if your goals start to change, or what your outcome wants to change, and that's when you do that. I would say after every election, it's every 2 years, it's a pretty good time frame to look at and say, is it still moving? It doesn't have to be a long meeting. Is it still moving us the direction we wanna go? Are we, something changed in the world that we need to think about? So that you can constantly say, yes, this is still what we want you to be using as your filter. As opposed to, yeah, that was the great strategic plan from 15 years ago. Nobody's read it, you guys are still using it, but that's not what we really want.
I think that it's the evolution of it, right? I think that for a long time, we were a really fast growth city, and we still are, but we were just gulping in one-time money, right? And so then it's easy to spend it on diversions and things like that, especially because we were lacking this. Not because different staff in different departments weren't doing their job, but really getting everyone together on the same page is so key. We made a tough decision the other day with the trailer, the football storage trailer. That was a hard decision, but it's because some of those things you have to reevaluate and say, we have to focus on these things. And then as situations change, that's why it's important to reevaluate it. The auto mall comes in and we start getting a good chunk of tax money coming in that's gonna pay for some of this stuff. That starts alleviating some of the pressure off of our budget to where we have some more flexibility so we can start looking at other things. But in my mind, we have to just refocus every department back on this. And then we make sure these are taken care of through our budget. And I agree, it sucks to say no to some of those things. It's not fun for us either, but if we don't, these things will always continue to lag and never get taken care of. And Gina Road will be dirt forever. And you know what I mean, it just can't happen. We have to reevaluate and refocus, and then we'll be able to change as money starts coming in.
So we will specifically plan to do things instead of waiting to see what we have left over to see if we can do them. So that's I'm hearing. I think as we define this basic service or this quality of life, this is what we want out here. This is how we want to do it. It goes there are some other, I think, good ones about, well, how do you make sure you have a proper housing and all that. I think those all start to fit underneath because you have to have some of that. If we're not, we have to have jobs out here if we're going to sustain some things. So,
Nathan, I think it's important to understand that every enhancement does not necessarily transition into increasing cost of delivering services. There are some enhancements that we can talk about that are maybe adjustments in policy or regulations. And in fact, in some ways, some of these adjustments might actually improve the bottom line. We're just being smarter with the resources that we have or the opportunities that come.
that is an excellent point, because not everything is, let's go add gold plating to something.
Yeah.
It really could be, we operate this way. If we tweaked how we operated, we'd save money or we'd get a better product. That's an excellent point.
Yeah, I think I would think if I'm in, say, Michael's shoes, I would think it's hard to identify some of those things if I don't have what the baseline plan or expectation is, right? If that goal line's always moving, we don't know what the heck council's gonna decide tomorrow, right? Then how do you, cause that's a heavy lift, right, to change those types of things. How do I spend that much time and effort on something that I don't know is gonna be relevant in 6 months if they change their minds, right?
Right, this nails us down, that makes everyone else's job easier.
Yeah, we can do a lot better job of representing what you're trying to achieve and what you believe the community wants us to achieve if we have that clear vision, that clear.
I think it is kind of the baseline, right? Here's the basic plan that we're building everything off of, whereas
In a break.
the huge amount of growth that we've had, it's been breakneck pace to just try to keep up with that, right? We've had to constantly put out fires, put resources to that, and some of the other just, we haven't gotten back to this plan. That's why I say I think we're at a point where we don't have as much of that, right? We don't have those kinds of unknowns anymore. We should be able to take a step back. We pretty much know what's gonna develop, how it's gonna develop at this point.
Yeah.
So having this plan in place, I think, helps everybody from that structural point of view, and then we can identify those types of enhancements.
And you bring up a good point, that a lot of these, I've done these before where you're super aspirational, telling the mayor, oh yeah, well, let's take over Houston, let's be the next space launch part of the world, right? We're gonna be here and here. That's super aspirational. Not at all realistic, because we don't have any land, and we have mountains, and they don't do that, right? So, but a lot of these decisions have been made, we have MDAs, there's things that are laying over them. So how do we do this piece, knowing that a lot of those decisions were made? We have MDAs that go for another 25 years, they're
Right.
40-year MDAs. So I think this is good. Lunch is here, so why don't we can take a break. I'm gonna take some pictures of this and then I'm gonna try and wordsmith something up there real quick. Think about. gonna stay away from the gyms. So this, I just added this after that concept, we worry about it so they don't have to. That's what we do. We worry about, it's, I'd like to tell this to Travis, it's how do we recruit differently, how do we excite somebody to drive a snowplow, and it's, you know, everybody else, it starts snowing and they think, oh, I'm gonna hunker down. Our people have to go out and go so that the ambulance can get to where it's going, so the police are out there. How do we sell that to people, like, this is an important thing to do, it's really, again, we worry about it. Like 7:15 the other morning, I drive my daughter to school and I see Justin out looking, see water coming up through the road, that's never a good sign. It's not a natural spring. But I'm thinking, okay, there's somebody who's already out there looking at the challenge, here's what we've gotta do. Those residents who are being fed by that probably haven't, they're not thinking about that. They will when we tear up the road and fix it, or however we fix it. But they just wanna be able to turn the water on and off. It's our crews who are out there seeing, hey, here's something, so. It's just, it's how do we sell this concept to our own staff? How do we, this is what we're doing, but how do we do it in a way that we recognize what it's doing? It's not just, I saw a water leak, that's what. We're thinking about it ahead of time, so that the residents never really, they're not impacted. They just know, when they hit the faucet, the water comes out. So I don't know, something like quality, reliable quality service and need to provide citizens a high quality of daily life. That'll probably be something like that. That's our goal, kind of the outcome, that's what we want to do. And then under that, there are specific kind of goals. We're talking about streets. And when we define this, we're talking a lot about the roads. It includes the maintenance and the capital, right? I just wanna make sure we're not focused on just one of them.
And you're also adding connectivity and those
Yeah,
aspects.
so you've got, that's a good point, Blake, so we have the physical asphalt part, but then we have function. How's it working? Right, how do you use it? Is it backed up? Can a pedestrian cross it easily? So those all start to fit in when we talk our road infrastructure, how are we looking at it?
Well, quick anecdote for you, a couple years ago at the town days, had all the trucks out there. And I made the comment to one of the employees that looking at the street sweeper, I'm like, it's one of the most important jobs in the city. And they were like, oh, I don't know about that. I'm like, no, from the residents' point of view, like, we all love to see that street sweeper, cause I know that the gutter's gonna be clean.
Right.
It's not gonna get backed up, it's not gonna cause problems, I'm not gonna drive over a screw or whatever it is, right?
It's that, it's doing this so they don't have to worry about it. Okay, so we talked streets, with public, so. It's almost as bad as chalk, isn't it? Open space, not operating systems.
Other stuff?
Other stuff. There we go. So, as we're looking at this is off this list here, and I think there are probably some others we wanna think about. Because when you're talking about this function and all that, these things we provide, we can't do that if we don't know where things go to. Planning becomes this piece of where are things going and how do we, if we know it's going to develop, engineering planning, what needs to be there to make it work when it opens? And if it works there, what does it do downstream? So they kinda, so if you're not listed, I'm not trying to knock planning off, I think some of these are just underlying. Finance has to be, finance doesn't need its own call out here simply because they all know they're involved in every one of those conversations. I had given you a sample, there's, one of these questions is as we go, what is public safety, we have to decide, that's where we start to say, the goal is to have high quality public safety, what does that mean? And we need, you know, what's our long range plan, how do we do that, what's our growth? I think we can define that, but is there anything specific about this public safety that was on this that we need to call out? That's what I'm trying to, we're gonna have to, staff's gonna have to create some things and bring them back to you, but I'm just trying to flesh out so I know. I don't wanna create some really cool flowery language that you all say, yeah, that's not it. I can't do that. I can't even say the word. Tells me I've been talking to him. Is there anything specific in public safety? Utilities that we need to specifically focus on when we're talking about these basic services? Is there something that you see, we have to make sure that this piece is called out?
I can't think of anything specific, I think it's the same definition. All of them, right?
That physical, there's this physical, then there's the function, how's it gonna work?
Right, that basic
Okay.
level that's reliable, and then, yeah, so I mean, public safety, it's, as chief says, when something bad happens, I want somebody to show up. You know, in a in a reasonable amount
I
of
don't
time.
want Marty Five to show up, I want, somebody that's capable of doing the job of public safety.
So,
We have people in areas, I mean, to see our trucks around everywhere, just that visibility and engagement, I mean,
But that's, you
I'm
know,
gonna say that
well-trained,
public
flexible,
safety-
responsive, yeah.
part of that basic level that,
well, is also more than just
Please,
and
yeah.
fire. Cause it's really about, I mean,
Public Works is a part of that.
whoever's a
right?
victim doesn't care what your crime status is.
right,
Hey, we're super safe, I got robbed. Or we're super safe, they don't, there's a whole lot to this, how people feel. And so there's a lot of people who have to play a role. I mean, from streetlights,
To safe
a well-lit park, well, those are so much easier for his staff to deal with because other people are taking a role.
accessibility.
roads that
Right.
create problems like
Right.
So you're okay if we expand these concepts a little bit? Sure. Cause there's also
For
fire.
each one,
That's a
you've gotta
concept we
define, I
need
mean,
to-
several staff members
Right.
said, you've gotta define what that level of service.
Right, and I think in all of these things that we talked about, there is a, you know, proactive, forward-thinking, innovative approach to all of those, right?
Well, and some of these will require some direction, cause I know specifically I called out in parks. There's a policy question that council has to think of. Is it a few big parks with tons of amenities? A bunch of small parks with very few amenities, but a lot of parks? This continuum, where should we be focused as staff? What's our appropriate, you don't have to, but I think that's how we'll word this is, we're gonna need some direction from you on parks and open space. What is it that when we want this level of service, what does that, cause that's really this next stage here. If you define levels of service, we can create goals and objectives on how to get there. But you need to start thinking about what is that level of service, and some of this I've already got some ideas and we can chat as staff, how we start to spell it out. So, if we spell it out, you don't have to buy that, yeah, that's exactly it, you can tweak it. But understand, this one, I really don't have any sense of where you want to be. This one, I think I've heard, these ones there's some industry standards we should be shooting for. Parks and open space,
That one especially, like my knee-jerk reaction to your question is balance. having too much of one thing or another.
So equity and things?
Right, they're all good in their own way, right? And you can make an argument for each one of them. We need athletic facilities, we need big parks with amenities and splash pads and pickleball and whatever else. Like, they're all great and you can make an argument for all of them, but if that's all you have, then you're missing something else. Right? That's the starting point, I think, for most of them.
So we'll have to, that's, at least tells us on this continuum, we're kind of towards the middle. Then, so as we start to weigh in on parks, right, cause you have a chance to do a park down here. And it's, well, like Teton, I saw the budget for that one, it's 3 acres and it's this huge budget, it's like, how do we do that? And you pull it back in, but then you have a 10 or 12 acre park. It should have a pretty good sized budget, cause you're expecting a lot of people to come to it. So I'm hearing you balance, does that kind of fit what people think? Again, we're at,
Just make it perfect. Why is it so hard?
well, and that, so we'll do, we can do all the gold plated stuff we want, it'll be awesome and wonderful. We'll just figure out how to pay for it, but I had a mayor, his name was Pat Kite. He kept telling, he would always say, you have to do the right things first so you can afford to do the other things later. His thing was economic development, always economic, we were gonna put everything in economic development so that we could get it. He was probably not balanced in his thought, but his concept is right? There are certain things we have to do, and if we do those first, then maybe it gives us the ability to do that next step. We just wanna be careful that we don't make decisions now that foreclose something we want to do later. So, and that, parkland is one of those, if you have the park space, you don't wanna, you think you're gonna need it someday, you don't wanna sell it today because somebody's in front of you, that's the. Are there any burning goals that you can think of right now that you said, I want this to be a goal under one of these areas for us to do? Or we can come back with, well, high level and then how we would try and get to there.
One thing that I like is, it's gonna be in the OS stuff, the other stuff. And it's in the communities and quality of life. We do an amazing job at events. I know that we do a bajillion of them, right? I would love to see us focus on the 5 or 10 that we can do exceptional. If that's
Or 3 or
public,
4.
yeah, yeah. But
And
those,
Ten
those,
is better.
Well, I think there's an evolution of that might occur with the new Friends of Harriman too,
Right,
right? There
right.
might be things that
Yeah.
are more appropriate to be,
public partnerships and
yeah,
stuff,
to be public driven, invented, funded and run.
Volunteer.
And then there's other things that are more appropriate for city staff to engage and plan and put together, right? The rodeo maybe is not a volunteer thing, right,
at a certain
Could be.
level, could be, yeah.
We rely heavily on.
really.
But with that one, I think, I don't know, a lot of us have talked offline about it for a long time, but they're all, the same thing, they're all great in their own, right? But you put them all together and you reach kind of a saturation point. If we're wanting to have the community involved, if there's something all the time, then I don't pay attention to it anymore. If there's these, like Teddy said, these big ones that we're focusing attention on and we wanna, focus on that community involvement on those things, it's easier to pull people's attention to those. But if it's too much too often, you lose that.
One observation I think on that is also as the community has grown and continues to grow, how we approach some of these events has to evolve as well. Because I think it was the Easter egg hunt, right? We just outgrew our ability
We don't do
to
that anymore.
host that, right? We just can't do it. It was fine when the community of 5,000-10,000, but as you move into the 60s, there are too many people, and frankly, we have, at our events, they're not just Harriman residents. We have people from other places coming here because we're in urbanized area.
Cause we created that city they wanna be in.
Those
and-
boundaries, right? We create the city they wanna be in, they come.
You know, Sherry usually makes this point that, you know, at what point do we cross from it being a community involvement event to entertainment?
Are you entertained?
Well, and there's things that, even though they have a historical precedent, right, they've been a part of the city for a long time. You made the point earlier, there's certain things that we may just not do anymore, and those are gonna be hard decisions, right? I mean, you think about like the Easter egg hunt, right, like, ooh, can't do that anymore, that was chaos, and then you think, okay, we'll try and do something else. And you had, what, 400 baskets or whatever, or what do you, I can't remember, what, like, here's an Easter egg decorating kit or something like that. Well, you give out 250 or 400 or whatever, and then you've got 3,000 people disappointed because they didn't get it too, right? So you start to look at some of those things, is that best use of funds and resources, and how is there another way we could impact the community or something like that? So I can see there being evolution in some of these things.
Sometimes less is more, right? The more bang.
No.
The more bang.
Your math
for
doesn't
buck,
add up.
sort of.
Sometimes more is more, you know?
Typically, what we're asked to do is do more with less. And then sometimes you're doing less with less, right, as you run out of money, you just can't do it, but I think, this is an interesting concept, it's easy to call it events, but there are probably other things that we've done traditionally that we have to look at internally and externally, how we deliver service, that as this making sure these are reliable, there may be some things here we need to shift away from and not do or add. And so that, I think those will be really on staff and asking our employees kind of, what is it that you do today that you don't think makes a difference? I'd be really curious what some of them think.
I also think there's something to be said for the fact that we go through this process, we come up with a plan, and it's a good plan, and then you have to immediately start over on figuring out ways to make the plan better. And if we're not constantly looking for opportunities to improve, be more efficient, save money, redirect things, change how we do stuff, we get behind. As a city, we've got to make that, process improvement a part of everything we do here. We've got to continually be striving to improve.
We're doing things just because we've always done them.
That's the worst reason.
Well, and true culture change and success is an evolution, not a revolution, right? It's not a one time, hey, we're doing this today, we've done, it takes time to build that culture and to move it. So there will be some of that back and forth with how do we make this, how do we use this lens, and you called out events, but how do we use that same lens to look at services we do or how we do it? And that could be policy changes too. I mean, we've just had a conversation about, we get open space from these developers. And then some of it, after a while, it's like, why did we want it?
And it's not true open space.
You can't use it, we can't even use it, and it's just stuff they gave us, but then we're, to maintain it or do whatever, so there may be some policies that we look at and say, yeah, we don't want that, or, but that would be at your level as we do this. So there's gonna be some staff, and hopefully councils will agree, you can look at it and think, what is it what are we trying to accomplish? What do we want? What does success look like? We won't get to it today, but we'll come back. And I'm calling two things. There's a strategic plan that says, here are these high level goals, and then we'll do, I call it a tactical plan because it seems to make sense. If you have a strategy, here are the tactics to do it. But that's where we'll put these, we'll have to break it down into small, discrete actions you can take that are measurable with time limits. You can say, by this date, we're gonna do this is who's doing it. So as we report back, we're moving towards the goal. Cause the hardest thing to do is get one of these done and then have this big aspirational goal. And then you don't ever do anything with it because it's too aspirational and nobody spends any time to say, well, what do I have to do first?
So is it fair to say though that we've outlined these broad areas of focus, and we've hinted at specific goals inside of these areas, so you're gonna define some more, I guess, outcomes under each of those areas, and then sub-define what are the actions we can take to obtain those things inside these areas, right? Okay.
And that's where our cause a real goal needs to be measurable, time limited. So, and I'm gonna call those sub-tasks or those action steps. We need to get those objectives, we need to take some time, once we create these high goals and build down and say, okay, it's the old adage of the elephant, it's one bite at a time, we have to figure out, well, what are those bites look like? How do we do this? Because otherwise, I've been involved in it too many times where you get, and you look at it and it just, everybody freezes deer in the headlights, cause it's so big and nobody knows how to get their arms around what you're looking at, instead of saying, well, if we want to had a lake like Utah Lake in our, how do we clean the shoreline? We wanna clean the shoreline, we want it to be a recreational amenity. That's this huge aspirational goal. Well, the first thing is, we need to go figure out where the shoreline is because of all the tules there and that other stuff, we can't see it. So you start doing just basic things, by this date, we're gonna meet with this group to talk about this, we're gonna work with this group to remove all the rebar and construction junk that's been poured on this waterfront over these years. Just basic things, by this date, we'll do this, so that you could start moving. Was it a recreational amenity at that point? No. But you had to remove certain barriers that existed to even get to the lake to look at it. But it was those kind of measurable things where you say, okay, we think we can do this, and that's a discrete action we can take. We can assign it to somebody, and here's the date they're gonna do it by. We know we can budget for that, and then when we do it, we say, okay, we've got that part, what's the next logical step? Moving to Tahoe wasn't one of those, cause that was my first thing. If we wanted to be Tahoe, we probably should move. Utah Lake ever becomes Tahoe, let me know. Same lake, same exact, shallow, lots of algae. Again, an audacious goal the council there wanted to do, let's go do this. So, I'm gonna look at staff, cause you all are gonna have to help me put this, I mean, I have all sorts of ideas jumbling around in my head, and that's probably not good right at the moment. Cause I'd start writing this and it'll be Nathan's jumbled head. So I'm gonna schedule a time, we'll get together, are there other questions you wanna ask council at this time to try and help us flesh out some things, or something you're still wondering about that we need to ask them while we have them for another 32 minutes?
So this is obviously focusing on that highest and biggest priority. But there were other values that we started talking about. Are you thinking we'd come back and start working on some of those other ones as well?
So I think they'll fit under here, cause we had that community, it really all seems to fall under this quality of life. But they're, like the communications and the community, that's almost like that, has to exist like finance, it has to be involved, we have to have the feedback with the citizens. So at least in my mind, I'm kind of, that's my jumbles, I'm jumping, okay, that has to be there. And we have to move beyond just, here's the information, to, as you move down that engagement, where they're engaging us to help us identify, well, what is the concern? Right, help us identify the concern so we have a discrete thing we can address, as opposed to, the roads are terrible. Okay, well, let's work with this neighborhood to find out, well, what's actually, well, it's not that the road, it's just that this intersection fails. Okay.
Because there's an underlying part of all of these, right? There's finance, communications, legal, engineering, right? The logistics of all of the stuff, that, like you said, it's almost a foregone conclusion, you have to do certain things for all of it, but it shouldn't be foregone. We need to define and list and include and plan those things, right?
So in that tackle plan, you'll see things that we have to think about, that council will be like, well, why do we, so we're gonna update a policy, why? Well, we need to update the policy in planning or engineering so that we can apply it this way, so we can get to this. We'll have to call those pieces out, because you're right, I don't wanna just be, well, let's just assume they'll do them. We'll have to call out on the tactics, because there are some of these that we'll be ready to move forward on faster. And some where we look at it and if we're honest with ourselves, we'll say, boy, we don't have any of the foundation done yet. We've gotta step back and figure out how to do these initial steps before we can even jump ahead and, replace a water line. We've done a lot of those, we know what those would be like, so that project moved forward versus, we just met this week on our water conservation. It's been in for a year, we're getting all sorts of questions. It's one that could use some time from us to say, okay, do we need to amend and update just to be clearer with people? Cause now that we've done it it's been in for a year and builders are doing it, they're asking us, questions, it's time for us to reevaluate. So some of that foundational work, we will do our best to call that out in the tactical plan, so you see that it's happening. And as always, if you question, well, why are we doing that, we'll explain it. We'll try to explain that some of these will be internal that we can just do, we can change, but others will have to come to you. We'll explain why that will be part of this. Per your strategic plan and these things, we need to change this policy. We wanna change this policy. That's those enhancements that Mike was talking about. We need to adjust this so we can do this.
I could see community values though extending into land use, which is not really utility specific. There may be some other kind of qualitative
We start to get
topics
into
that the
this.
council may wanna address. It's not just like basic services.
You start to get to neighborhoods and community, that's probably community. What is it that, cause you can have the best services in the world and have a street that the only thing you can see are cars, are driveways and garages, you can't see front doors. It's, it's got perfect, beautiful sidewalks and all that, and you never see another human being. It may not feel like much of a community. That quality of life may not be really high, so how do we take these essential things and also turn them into these enhancements and
Yeah.
betterments we talked about?
So,
Keep thinking about that, Mike, because we'll need to word it, I
Yeah.
just don't know how to do it right now.
I love the direction of this as basic, this is how we should operate as a city. Where do we get the next step? Good job, you're doing a job, right? Good job, we elected you to do this. Where's that, is it the other I guess it'd be the enhancement part of it, right? How do we wrap a strategic plan around what we want to see our city become? This is where we want to be, we're not here yet. Once we get here, I guess it could be a 5 or 10 year long-term goal, but I'd love to see a lot of that happen in the next 3 to 5 years, right? Some of that vision, some of that, what the next thing our city is gonna do or have. And that could come through partners or building or bringing other services in.
So I actually think that's really important. I think what we'll do is we can bring you back something, and when we bring it back, just ask council, think about, as Councilor Hodges just said, this is today, what is it that we want 10 years from now? Assuming this is done. Assume this is done, and you're gonna have this, what is it that what's the next thing that we need to be doing? That this is all running like a fine-tuned machine. Everybody's, what is that next piece? Because that would be, I don't know if we have, we probably might be able to define it today, but I don't know if you've had enough, if you've been thinking that. What is the?
And some of that's pie in the sky, right? Some of those are audacious goals, like
Yeah,
maybe it is a football stadium, maybe it is a rugby stadium, maybe it is, something that's tangible that we can taste and feel, like maybe it is a Rec South, right? That's coming, that's those kind of things that we know are in the pipeline, but how do we facilitate and how do our goals now today match that in 3 to 5 years?
Well, Nathan, I think, I've been kind of quiet, because I guess I came with a very different approach today. To me, this is, and I get where we're going with this, but to me, this is the direction we're already headed with, we've got the CIP in place. Like, I think we're missing that midterm too, that 2 to 3 years, like I was talking to Michael about it before, there's stuff that doesn't cost any money that we should, and I guess I went to the league meetings a couple weeks ago, and I just saw, we're seeing all these ideas coming out of all these other cities. And we're just lacking some of that coming out of this city, some of that vision, some of those ideas, some of those concepts, where we wanna be in 2 years to go to the developers and say, like, this is what we picture in this area, I met with DAI this morning on that, they kind of brought up that mixed use area right there. I'm so sick of my words. But, like, what do we wanna see on that? They kind of said what we wanna see on that commercial piece. Like, I don't know, I don't want them, developers are always coming to us, our development partners are always coming to us and proposing stuff, but where I look at South Jordan, this urban, that's not I don't think that's our, what do we call it, our values, that's not our values of that kind of, but they've got this massive plan for this area that didn't just come from the Millers, that came from,
Then we're
a
working with
combination
their
of
staff.
city and I think we're missing that piece, and so I think, you know, Michael had this great example that in his community, he's not worried about, and I think we're all involved in government a little bit, so I think our vision's a little bit, cause we do worry about this stuff. But I really think to Joe Schmo's, they don't wanna think about this stuff, they do wanna think about neighbors, they wanna think about neighborhoods and their, you know, their friends, that's what makes us somebody comfortable as their neighbor. What did you say, Michael? Maybe you ought to just tell me.
Well,
You
I was
told
just
me.
saying that in my own community, I appreciate the fact that basic services are delivered. I'm grateful for that. But I don't feel like my community actually makes my world necessarily better. Like, it's not a betterment so much. It could be anybody in those seats sitting, you know, at the city council. It's just kind of basic services, which is good. The things that I love about my city is not what the city government's doing. It's just what's already there. It's my friends, it's the geography, it's, you know, it's those things. But I've seen other cities that provide some of those additional services or features, and it is an expression of their values, like what they care about. I agree, we do need to deliver these basic services, that's fundamental. But I'm curious as to what are those other elements that we're trying to achieve as a community
Where do we-
beyond that?
And I like where you're going, Mayor. And as Councilor Hodges put it, what's our next thing? What do we want? So assume, we're gonna come up with basic service, we're gonna come up with plans on how to do that. But as we're doing that, what are we missing? What should we be doing?
And I guess that's my challenge to our council. I think that's our job. If you ask me what my job as a city council person is, it's the budget, that's all important stuff, but we've hired some professional people to do all of that as well. Like, I believe we have the right people in place in every position right now within the city to do, like, a lot of that stuff's gonna happen. You've made the CIP, like you said, you thought that was pretty widely used, right? You found that it's not. That's a lot of those things are being put in place. But as a council, we've got to say, where is this city gonna be in 2 years? Really, where are we gonna be in 2 years? And it doesn't have to cost anything. It truly, like we talked about this in planning commission all the time, there's placemaking that can be done in neighborhoods throughout the city that don't cost money, you know, there's just so much that doesn't have to add anything, that can just be, what's our vision, what's our goal? And I know we don't wanna talk too much about vision, but we still should be setting goals as a
So what you're saying is
council.
assuming what we've just talked about, assuming that's done,
Yes.
so what are your ideas?
Well, that's what I'm saying, I think we all need to have those ideas, I mean, that's all mine, I mean, if you look, my 6 cards, they were all those type of things, that was, you know, I didn't,
So maybe there is another, I think that's probably what's been a hindrance to these kind of meetings in the past, is that we're trying to do all those things at once, right? We're trying to make the build out of the city, what it's gonna look like, and how we're gonna get there in the midterm, and what our underlying principles are, and all that kind of stuff. I think this is a good foundation from which we can launch from, but to your point, Mayor, there may be another meeting where we talk about what are some aspirational things above and beyond this, you know,
and I think we
broad
Because-
decision making that
Because
we'd like
if-
to see, right?
If
You know?
staff has unanswered questions about these things, right, and resources, availability of resources, it's hard to go to that next step. So we kinda have to say, this is the first step.
Or sometimes
and
those
this
things
is-
could be in
So
conflict with
assuming-
each other, right?
So again, assuming those things are done, right, then I think Steve's right, then maybe that's a separate meeting is case, so if we have this plan in place, we know those things are done and staff has a reasonable expectation of what there is to work with, then what are council's goals beyond that?
Because we can chase the shiny object, but if we don't have the basic stuff taken care of and we don't have a good plan around capital improvement and roads and
I agree.
all that kind of stuff, then we're getting squirreled a little bit away from what we have to do.
And see, and
So-
I disagree with it getting square, I think, because if we're gonna say, for example, I'll take one example of what, and I think we've all talked about it. We've got one asset in our community that very few other communities have, that's a massive, we've got a hillside that we're protected. Like, how are we, like, I think we've all talked about how the trails could be an economic driver for this. How does that could fit absolutely into the basic services of And without, we have some budget set aside for trails, we've got the committee that's gonna come on, I think the way that I've heard talk about the vision with the Friends is there's gonna be more emphasis to build more trails out there, like how can we take advantage of that? Like, to me, that should be a focus of this community is, we've got this trail network, how do we take advantage of that as a city? That's something we have to start thinking about today, because it can be an economic driver. I don't know, I'm not good at enunciating this and putting in a plan, but we've all talked about the trails being an economic driver and how we've missed the boat maybe on putting some growth, the economic centers right next to some trailheads, but like we've got Juniper coming on that is gonna be a world-class trailhead. I'm sorry, that is world-class trailhead. What are we doing to take advantage of that trailhead? What are we talking about possibly, there's still time to go to Wasatch and saying, you know, you're right down the road. There's some amenities you could bring to this area in this commercial space to say, this is what we envision for this area. Like it's,
Are we working with the county to open up real recreation? Right,
That kind of
joining that and the ATV
and I guess that's where I'm going. It's not money. I'm not saying we have to go divert money from the basic services to build more trails. I'm not saying that, but if we put that vision out to
You stop doing
Anthony
them.
and his team and saying, this is, you know, to Joe and saying, you know, Joe, we support the trails, you know, your trail system, what can we do? Whether that's now pushing onto the Friends committee saying, trails, focus on the trails because that will benefit. I'm not saying any of this has been bad at all. I'm just saying I guess I feel like our role as a council is to look at at least, I don't have any of these big audacious goals. I'm not good at that either. Would I love a rugby stadium in that, you know, would I have loved something like that and stuff, but I think it's these little projects that we need, not little goals of where we need to drive. I mean, that's our job, is to drive those short-term goals.
So,
Can I just say that the complaints I get from residents, the things that I get calls about, aren't, why don't we have a world-class trail system? Why don't I have this park strip finished?
Right.
They're not, why don't we have a 40-acre park with soccer fields? It's, why is this a mud pit in this, you know,
why isn't this
thing over here? Right.
retention thing taken
Right.
care of?
It's not why, you know, why don't we have all this other stuff? It's, why is the traffic suck on this road, right? That's what people are at least
And then-
communicating that they're concerned about.
And I don't wanna put words in staff's mouth, but I've sat in this chair for a number of years, right? It's okay, well, council says they want these things, but that's taking money away from finishing all of those little detention areas. So you're saying you wanna do the fun shiny stuff, but there's these other things that we're taking those resources away from, so you're kicking the can down the road, right? And that's kind of, anybody feel free to speak up and tell me I'm speaking out of turn, but there's that part of it. And I think that's why we started where we're at, is there has to be that baseline. So if we're making those kind of decisions, it has to filter through the strategic plan first, right? These are the non-negotiable things. We can't pull resources from these things to chase the rugby stadium or to chase this.
And I'm not
The
suggesting
toughest thing
anything
is,
else.
Which is, I
I'm
guess,
almost
for those of
thinking
us that have been here, that's kind of what we've done, right?
so if we have these basics, should we be looking at ways where you leverage what we're doing there to get, right, if we're already doing some of this stuff. You know, and I have to think about how this, but what I'm hearing is, let's assume we come up with a plan, we're gonna deal with these basics, right? They're gonna be happening, should we be looking as staff and council, how do we leverage that work to get these next things as there's a difference between a city and a community, let's just call it that, right? A city is all those, it's the underground infrastructure, but the community is where people live, right? How do we leverage the basics to start getting here? That, I
And if
think
I
that
can
is
add
your
Let me
challenge.
just add a little color to the comment I made, because I absolutely agree with you that as a council, we should be creating aspirational goals and direction for bigger plans, for community enhancements, for the shiny stuff, right? That's part of our job as much as anything else. But, not but, because they're not exclusive of each other. And I think that we can do that part better because of what we've done today, if that makes sense. I think, but to your point, I don't think we've had enough conversation about the things that you're asking of us. I don't know that we've come down and say, well, I'd love to see one of these, I'd love to see this, and I'd like for us to try and consider how we do this. And then, same kind of thing, we can come up with a whole bunch of different wish list stuff, you can prioritize them, you can organize them, we can list them in terms of, probability, timeframes, and start working on some of those things.
I feel like we've got a lot of ground to make up because these meetings should have happened the last 10, 15, 20 years, right? At the beginning, at the foundation of the city, this meeting happened, right? The core people had that vision and plan of what they wanted. Somewhere along that 15, 20-year mark, they've lost that and we're rebuilding it now, so.
These meetings have happened virtually every year I've been here,
Okay.
Right.
but no
Nobody-
goals ever get set.
Yeah.
The
So we need a
last time-
roadmap.
The last time I pushed for a goal, the only thing I got was spend $500,000 to design a public works building. That was the only goal we came out of that whole meeting with. But these meetings have been held. We had some great ones that Travis and Tammy did several years ago. They have happened. We just haven't taken them anywhere.
So how do we, once we get this plan, once we figure out what we wanna do
Well,
have a
that,
clear
so,
enough roadmap
so
for them to
if I
implement?
can elaborate and stop me if I'm wrong, and that's kind of where I was going with my comment, right? Alan's been really good at a lot of points along the road of tapping the brakes and saying, hey, like what you're talking about is great, but that means you can't do some of these other things, right? And council keeps moving the goalposts because we're chasing the fun, shiny stuff that's in front of us. We're making that decision in a vacuum because that's somebody wants an answer to that thing right now. But hasn't been the strategic plan, right? That gets looked at first, run it through that filter first, and then you can bring it to council and say, okay, there's this project that wants an answer, or these people that want, or this developer that wants an answer. And here, if you do this, this is what it means, right? This is the effect it has on all of this other stuff. Like, that's what we haven't had, cause they haven't had that direction.
So
Is that?
take one of your
Fair.
clients, you do a whole financial scenario for them, but husband still spends credit card out the wazoo. There are plans there, right? Is he chasing that shiny thing?
Yeah, and they just aren't following
Because
it,
he's
and they never
getting that-
achieve
yeah.
what they want to,
Well,
and that's like, it
I like
gives a
that.
great analogy for kind
Yeah,
of
I
what's
do too.
happened, right?
When this building came to the council, I said, you can do it, but you won't be able to do any capital purchases for 3 years. You gotta let your sales tax come up.
Yeah.
The first meeting after when they agreed to that, we bought a street sweeper, okay? And I can't remember what else, but there was $700,000 worth of capital assets added to our list the next meeting.
Right.
The last 3 years, we've had $4 to $7 million of extra things added to the budget the day after it was approved.
Is that on us,
It's on,
council, on?
Yeah.
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 And so how do we
It's
make this
also on
plan for
staff.
staff? Well,
Right, if we say we can't do it, and you make it, we should not be bringing you back things that we just said we shouldn't be doing.
One, and having this plan in place helps with that, right? So we've given direction on, here's our goals, here's what matters first. Don't bring us anything that takes away from this.
remind us about
So,
that too.
Right.
yeah.
so I think next, I was gonna write them out. Staff, we're gonna take what you've given us today, we'll start putting it together, but before we finalize that, I would like another meeting where we do talk about this aspirational piece. We can show you what we've come up with, and you assume if this is functioning and this is first, how do we leverage some of this to start moving us to this?
So I think you can leverage the planners, the developers, the other people that are
That's
coming
what
to
I'm
the
getting
at.
city
Well,
to give us
Yes.
these infrastructure
And then
things.
this, I mean, having this in place
Yeah.
then helps us be realistic, right? And helps staff hold us to that base.
More accountable.
We did the
Yeah.
plan, right? So now you're saying you want to use that credit card to buy the new truck, but we have this plan, right? This doesn't fit in your plan.
Yeah.
Like, that's what, I think that's where staff comes in on that part, is to say, look, this is the plan. this is in front of you and it's great for all these reasons, but it takes away from the plan.
Well, and
And we just haven't had that, right? So
Yeah,
like
it's
if
tough.
I'm
Because
any
as
of
a
these
council,
guys sitting
you
here,
have the ability to
I'm
override
frustrated
all
with
of
every single meeting
At
that
any point in time.
Yeah, we,
Can I
as a
just make a
council,
quick
we can just vote
point?
to blow it up and be stupid, you know?
Which you could, right? And but that part of that conversation is, well, then we need to sit back down and reevaluate the plan, right? If this now is because it could be the thing that comes in front of you is not on your plan, but
It's
a majority of you
important.
look at it and say, that's actually, we think that moves us farther to our end goal than the plan does, so we're gonna jettison a part of the plan and do it, right?
And in my
That's your-
opinion, we need all of you I mean, I think sometimes there's a reluctance to tell people in these seats what they don't wanna hear. Right? And we need you all to tell us that hey, that doesn't fit in with what our goals are, with what the basic plan is. I know that like, if you're just looking at it in a vacuum, it sounds great and there's no reason to say no. But you guys are the ones that have to not let us look at it in a vacuum.
Well, can I pontificate for a minute? I'm just gonna be quiet. Steve, your point, all the complaints are absolutely those concerns. We get those, nobody calls and raves about what we're doing, but the thing with the growth that we've seen, and the other thing I think we've had these outreach meetings. This community is searching for a new pride and identity right now. And I think that's incumbent on us to create that pride. Like if we can start creating these ideas, we need to create pride to where these concerns are always gonna come up. I mean, you look at somebody like Draper, you know, we seem to compare ourselves to Draper quite a bit, right? They're having those same issues. They're growing, they're dealing with traffic, they're dealing with infrastructure. But everybody knows Draper's this, you know, this is just an example. Everybody knows Draper's this great mountain biking community, right? You know how much Draper spends on their trails? Zero. They don't spend a dime on their trails. But because that council at one point said, we want a trail system, that's the value of that community. So their nonprofit, for example, is driving that. That's because that came from the council. So now there's outside people. I think we've all talked about this in a way, like the size of city we are now, us as council and our staff, we can't do it all. Like we can't be this solution to everything. We have to start relying on others. And that's where I keep going back to this nonprofit, that's just the example that's right in front of us right now. I've seen that board run with some vision that we put out there in some meetings. That's not gonna cost us anything, like this vision, they've got people that have applied for the trails and arts that have visions.
But I think that's a perfect example of what we're talking about though, right?
Right.
And what helps all these people do that is, okay, we have our, I don't wanna say marching orders, we have the plan, we have our framework, right? And then it's the decision of, well, what are the things we say no to that can be done differently? But to this point, like if I'm in one of those seats, I'm looking at people in these seats going, you're changing your mind every 2 seconds, how can I help you with that? Alan wanted me.
Well, I just wanted to point out, as we've discussed here today, we've talked about the fire department, we've talked about the police, we've talked about the water doing okay and doing what you want. You've talked about the parks and the roads and events not doing what you're envisioning them. Fire has their own money, we created a district. Police have their own money, we created a district. Water has their own money, we can't touch that. So the things that you're talking about not getting done are the things that are getting what's left. You know,
And where
we're
the
funding,
goalpost
we're
is moving all
funding
the time.
police and fire at a very high rate compared to others. And yet, we can't do the streets and the parks. You know, it's a funding mechanism that you're either gonna have to come up with more money for streets and parks,
And that's what this is,
or
right?
we're
That's what
gonna
we
have
need
to
that.
realign what we do with these districts.
Perfect example.
And I'm not saying, I hope this hasn't been taken as I don't disagree with anything we've done at all, not at all. Not whatsoever, I'm just thinking we can do, they don't have to be mutually exclusive, I think we can be working towards that while also having the next meeting where we are trying to come up with some.
I think they go hand in hand.
I agree, I
Right.
think
They do.
we've well defined the basics and the goal, and now we need to work on the enhancement discussion, right? That's where we
That's a
need
great
to have
word,
some
too.
focus as well.
And I don't wanna move goalpost, I know that I don't wanna spend more, I mean, that's one thing,
I don't
I
think
hope-
enhancement has to be money.
that's what I'm saying,
It
I
can
think
be,
there's.
right? But it I think we have to.
It's, well, enhancement can be
Discuss all of
partnering
those.
with some
Yeah,
people.
absolutely.
But how do you know which of those to do? Like, I'm thinking about Mike's comment about changing policy or ordinances to,
Right.
how do you know what to do on that side of the fence if you don't know what the budget is for those things, if you don't know what the priority is,
Well,
right? Cause every time, that's how I feel.
I would say
I
the
made this
outcome,
comment,
if we know what the outcome wants to be, then it starts to feed into, yeah, what, cause we need the budget, but if we know we want to get here, we can start to identify those not things that don't cost. We have to change policies now to get there 5-10 years from now, but we have to do some things, and
well, I
maybe
think
that's
it's
where
part
we're.
of that process is, okay, well then what's realistic? Right, so, okay, well, we wanna have, maybe we wanna have the trails and whatever else. But if we have this strategic plan in place, these are the most important things that we can't take away from. And everybody knows what that is, and this is the aspirational stuff, then it's a lot easier to figure out how to do it or if we can do it, right? But I feel like a lot of these meetings that I've sat through over the years, it's, yep, that's great, yep, that sounds great, yep, that sounds great. And we still don't know how the hell we're gonna do any of it.
And let's be, I think there are some, speaking of opportunity cost, right? I think there's things that are probably, we could call the enhancement stuff or the wish list stuff, but are actually things that we have to do. We just haven't come up with a plan on how to do them.
Yeah.
I.e., we gotta fix 103, right? I mean,
Right.
it has to be fixed. It's falling down. It can't last for much longer. But I don't know that we have a location, a plan, a cost, a budget, how we're gonna finance it, like all, we don't have that stuff yet. You know, that's just one example of other things around the community that,
Well, and we're picking on roads, I mean,
Right.
road's a good example, if I'm in his seat, like,
Right.
this, what you guys are saying is great, but you've never given me enough money to even do a fraction of it. Right?
right,
You keep adding more and telling me to do the same maintenance on more with actually less and less and less.
right, and then, and,
So how do we
but I think
empower-
as we're looking at all of the things that we'd like to do as a community, the longer term vision of things, and I don't wanna say completely just aspirational wish list stuff, because to Michael's point, they're the things that build a community. I mean, up here, I put my card as sense of community pride, right? Like, I want people to feel excited about the things that are here, that they're like, yeah, you should live in Harriman, look at what we got, you know, that kind of stuff. So I'm completely with you on that.
But it's hard to, there's different levels of that pride, right? So to me, I've said this a few times just today, that it's hard to be excited about, say, the rodeo and have pride in my community because we love the Harriman's rodeo, if driving down the road, it really pisses me off, right? That the road stinks to get there and they've never done anything about it. Like, there's this, if the basic things are there and people don't think about those, Harriman's great because and then they drive through, and we've had this with snow removal, right? Our snow removal's great. You drive a mile down the road to a neighboring city and it's terrible. Harriman's awesome, right? We get that stuff a lot, so.
Only plow the borders.
If if the basic stuff works well, then it's easier to transition to the next stuff.
But we are, I wanna be respectful, I know you guys gotta, so plan on a second one and maybe that more aspirational, we'll work trying to build if it's a stool, we'll have two of the legs, we won't have the third, you gotta come up with that, but we'll start putting some stuff together on what we talked about today, and if you can be thinking about, 2 to 5 years, be realistic, we have 2 to 5 years, and probably that 5 to 10 is that true aspiration, how are we gonna get there? If it's mountain biking, the old story that when Charlotte, North Carolina became a banking center, they just said they were a banking center, they were not. They faked it until they became, and if you've been to Charlotte, you go, there are banks everywhere, and there's these cool old buildings that they've renovated, then you look at the Google map and realize, no, they're new buildings, they made look old, so they could give the feel that they had redone their downtown instead of just blitzing it all and building buildings. So fake it till you make it sometimes works, but we just need to know what that vision is.
Can I add one thing, Nathan?
Sure.
A lot of the things that you've mentioned, staff are thinking about, but we are constantly reshuffling our priorities to get what's in front of us done. And so I don't want you to think that we haven't considered, how do we get a rugby stadium? Or how do we do all these things? It's a chip at a time, right? And we're just chipping down.
New council
That's
comes
like
in
I
and
said,
they've been working on something for
Absolutely,
2 years, new people get elected and
Well,
suddenly
and I hope
they touch
that
all that in a
none of-
different direction.
And I think I speak for all of us, I hope nothing today's been a criticism, I felt
No,
like
I
it's
don't
on
think it has.
council, I feel like really it's our job to help give you those priorities, so
Yeah.
you're not, so you know how to reshuffle those.
We reshuffle a lot.
And we respect that, like I said,
How do we make that less,
We are
though? That's the
considering
thing.
those things and
thank you to staff for your
And we're
participation
going
today.
Based off of who you
So-
guys
We'll,
want. Like, we keep saying this.
we will be in touch. It may be,
End of the
it's gonna take us a little while internally, cause I've gotta now schedule a time where I can get all these people, you know, and
Destination you want to be.
we can
But our
hammer through this.
Now you throw
So
15
then before you
different
guys
fees.
decide,
This is what we
and then
want,
everybody
but this
gets
is what
mad
we
that
have,
it's
this is what
fast
we can
food, and I'm
Yeah,
like,
or just
well,
take
the main
we
ones.
didn't know what else we
Um,
wanted to be.
There may be
Then
some-
how, I mean, we gotta empower staff to.
Okay, I'll look for a motion to adjourn, so we can,
So moved.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you guys for coming and doing this. I was very excited to have this meeting today.
Very good to sit in.
Yeah.
Good perspective, right?